Hello, my name is Alice Van Ommeren, and I am a guest speaker for the San Jose Postcard Club. And I'm doing a presentation on Yosemite's historic hotels and vintage postcards. And actually, this is a repeat of a presentation I did last week that wasn't actually recorded. So we're walking through it again with the recording here. A little bit about why my interest in Yosemite. I was actually, after high school, I got a job in Yosemite as a maid at the Iwani Hotel and spent a summer in this beautiful place, Yosemite National Park. I subsequently worked there several other summers in the restaurants, and one time I even stayed through the winter. And my final job was actually as a dispatcher for the Yosemite transportation system. Again, this was a long time ago when I was in my 20s, and life has gone on. And as I became a postcard collector, I was very much interested in a variety of topics, but since I had worked in Yosemite, I was very much interested in collecting Yosemite postcards. And so I slowly started looking at what kind of postcards were available that depicted Yosemite. And I tried to focus really on postcards that captured human history of Yosemite. So there's obviously a lot of postcards of the natural landscapes of the park, but I really focused on hotels, restaurants, any kind of structure that was human structures, including bridges and roads. And my collection today is I have about 700 postcards that kind of depict a lot of these themes. And about 10 years ago, I decided to publish a book through Arcadia Publishing through the Postcard series. And the title of the book is Yosemite's Historic Hotels and Camps in Vintage Postcards. Today's presentation really is going to focus primarily on the hotels, and there's some unique hotels that are not there anymore that we can talk about that are being depicted in postcards. A little bit about this is actually the cover of the book. The postcard that we are seeing here is actually the Sentinel Hotel. It's a real photo postcards from the early 1900s. And this hotel was built in 1876. Across from one of some earlier hotels that are actually not captured in postcards because it was just, late 1800s. There were some hotels there and we'll talk a little bit more about the location of these early hotels. The unique part about the Sentinel Hotel here, and I'm going to assume most of you are familiar with Yosemite or have been to Yosemite, and it leads some of the natural landmarks there. But this hotel actually gave you a great view of Half Dome as well as Yosemite Falls, and that was one of the reasons why this hotel was located here. It also was the first stop for the stages. So stagecoaches that came in, as you can see here in this great postcard, would stop there. And so it also was the only hotel for many years, and we'll talk a little bit about why that was the case. One thing about this hotel, it wasn't weatherized, so it tended to be pretty cold in the winter times, and so it was not always feasible to stay there during the winter. We're going to talk a lot about hotels here, but before we do that, I think it's important that we'll talk a little bit about how people got to Yosemite. And there are a lot of transportation postcards, so I'm going to just kind of reflect here. What you're seeing here is actually the Yosemite Valley Railroad Station, which was located in Merced. Merced is in the Central Valley of California. And people would come from Los Angeles or from San Francisco and take the train to Merced. And Merced was kind of on the outskirts of the park. And needless to say, people would at least start here as far as getting there. This particular station was burned down in 1929. But again, it's a great postcard of a wide border postcard of the railroad station there. So it would take about 4 hours to get to what we call El Portal. So from Merced to El Portal, this was the line that followed. It followed the Merced River, and it was completed in 1907. and it was called A Short Line to Paradise. And it ended here in El Portal, and what we're seeing here is the El Portal station, which was built in 1909. And this really was the park boundary where people, where the train actually stopped here. So great early 1900s postcard here. And then passengers would overnight at the El Portal Hotel. There wasn't enough time to go into the valley, so people would stay at this beautiful hotel. It was built in 1908. It was 4-story. It was very much a luxury hotel. It had a very large lobby, 2 dining rooms, and you can kind of see the wide covered veranda that goes around it. And the stagecoaches would just pull up here. And then the next morning, visitors would take the stage, and it would take a stagecoach, and it would take 3 hours to get into the valley. And so that was, after taking the train, spending the night, they would take a 3-hour stagecoach ride into the valley. So that was the way to get into the park. Motor coaches were introduced in 1913, and of course, the journey started a lot faster. But there's a lot of postcards that reflect the transportation, a lot of stagecoaches, a lot of train postcards, etc. So getting into the park is very well documented in postcards. So a little bit about some of the roads that go into Yosemite. There were actually, by the mid 1870s, there were 3 roads that entered the park. One was the Big Oak Flat Road, which was completed in 1874. And it was basically a wagon road that would come from the north. There's the Wawona Road, which was built in 1875, and that would actually come in from the south. And then there's also the Coulterville Road. And so there was a lot of competition between these, trying and getting into the park by a variety of entrepreneurs, stagecoach drivers, etc. And it wasn't until 1910 that automobiles were introduced into the park. But a lot of great postcards were collected on that. So let's talk a little bit more about the Sentinel Hotel that we saw earlier in the first postcard. You see it here reflected here on the left. And actually what happened is that by 1900, this really became kind of more of a complex. Buildings were being added to the Sentinel Hotel. And because of a variety of reasons, that really became a monopoly. Some of the additional buildings that we're seeing here, such as it was called River Cottage, Cedar Cottage, Oak Cottages. So cottages were kind of like built around there. I do want to point you to across from the Sentinel Hotel there, across the street there is what you call Cedar Cottage. And we'll talk a little bit about that cottage in the next postcard. But really what happened is this complex really turned into a small village. And we'll talk about it in a second here. Before we do this, I want to show you a little bit when I talked about the Sentinel Hotel turning into a village. I'm going to show you this map here, and it shows. And here is the Sentinel Hotel that we talked about earlier. And for those of you that are familiar with Yosemite, let me talk you through this a little bit here. This is outside there. When you drive into the park, on the left will be Yosemite Falls across from the meadow. And as you enter here, you'll see the chapel on the right, and that's this building right here. And the village was really kind of beyond that. Here you go up the Sentinel Bridge. If you want to go to Yosemite Village, you can make a left. And if you go to Curry Village, you make a right. And here's the Sentinel Hotel that we've been talking about. The Cedar Cottage is right across from it. And we'll show you a postcard of that in a minute. But I really want to point out all of these buildings here. A village store. There's a variety of photo studios here. There's a post office. So it really kind of became a really good, it's called the Old Yosemite Village. And here is the chapel for those of you that are familiar with that. But let's talk a little bit about this Cedar Cottage here and what's so interesting about that. Cedar Cottage formerly was known as Hutchings House. James Hutchings was a Yosemite pioneer. He was very much interested in establishing accommodations into the park. And so he bought this cedar cottage, which was used to be the Upper Hotel, which was built in 1859. And he bought this building in 1863, but he wanted to add a kitchen and a sitting room. And so, environmentalist that he didn't want to cut down the tree. And so he actually built the sitting room around the tree. And that's what you're seeing here in this great real photo postcard. Of course, none of the buildings are left in the village. They've all been demolished and destroyed, and the village has actually been moved at this point. But the tree is actually still there. And so, if you're interested, I mean, there's ways to find where the tree was and actually find out where this cottage is. It's called the Big Tree Room, and there's quite a few postcards of it. But this one is great. It's a real photo postcard that's been very nice. A little bit more about the village. Here's actually Arthur Pillsbury postcard. The Sentinel Hotel, you see that in kind of in the background on the left. But here you see some of the buildings that are part of the village. And here is actually the village store here on the left that you're seeing. Little this is a white border postcard of the old village, the village store that I was just talking about right here. But a lot of other things, like I mentioned, a general store. There was also a blacksmith. There were stables. There were some residences, but there were also photo studios. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. There was a saloon. There was a bathhouse, and etc. But so it really became an entire village that you're seeing here. I want to talk a little bit about because postcards are really photos that have been turned into postcards, and these photos were taken by photographers. And Yosemite drew quite a few famous photographers that we know now that have captured Yosemite. And what's unique about it is they actually had their studios in this village. So I want to talk just about a couple of these photographers, and I'll point to those. Let's see. First one right here is Julius Boysen. He actually had a little tent studio, and he sold postcards, but he also took photos. And unique thing about Boysen, he was actually open in the winter. And so what happened was people would like to have their photos taken with maybe Yosemite Falls in the background or Mirror Lake. There were a lot of photographers that would, you see a lot of pictures of Mirror Lake with people in the foreground. And basically that was what photographers did. They would take pictures and then they would sell the photos to the tourists. So those were some of their businesses. They also would take photos and sell them to publishers who would turn them into postcards, and then they would sell the postcards in their studios or in their little stores. One thing about Boysen is that he's one of the few people that would actually, his wife actually had an interest in Native Americans that were, part of the Yosemite Valley. And so there are quite a few postcards of Native Americans, and those are unique by Boysen. He was one of the photographers that really focused on that topic. The other one right here is Best Studio, Henry Best. He was actually a landscape painter, and but he also did some photography and he did some postcards as well. But what unique part about Henry Best is that his daughter actually married Ansel Adams. And so Ansel Adams is known as a well-known photographer of Yosemite. And today we still have Ansel Adams Gallery. But Henry Best, his father-in-law, has really provided him the opportunity to flourish in his photography. Let's see, there's a couple more. This I talked earlier about Arthur Pillsbury, and I'm going to point you right here to his. It was kind of a pavilion. Arthur Pillsbury was very much kind of attuned with what people wanted as far as photography. He actually he actually was a San Francisco publisher. And in 1924, he decided to open a studio, or he actually bought a studio in the village that we're seeing there. And he did some amazing photography, but he was very much in tune with what people wanted to see. He also was very much into postcards. His pavilion, he actually had a table spread out so people could buy postcards, write them at the table, and then also send them off. So he was very much in tune with those kind of, very much an entrepreneur as far as business opportunities. So one of the only buildings, and I'll talk a little bit more about the only building that's really left of the village is the chapel here. And actually, this is a photo that Ansel Adams took, and it was published. The publisher is Best Studio. So a great example of some very early Ansel Adams work that you're seeing here in a postcard. Again, it's the only building left today. The Yosemite Village actually, for a variety of reasons, they decided to move the village a little bit more north. Part of it was right along the Merced River, and so it experienced a lot of flooding. Also, as the way the buildings were set up, it was really kind of a mishmash of buildings. And as the park started developing and becoming more, Park Service came in and wanted to be more, make it more attractive to tourists, they decided to slowly start taking the buildings out, starting in the 1930s. And by 1940, the village store was actually the last building to go. And so all the buildings have been removed with the exception of the chapel here. This chapel is the oldest structure in the park. It was built in 1879. And its current location is actually not its original location. It was actually moved. It used to be at the base of the 4 Mile Trail. And this New England style building was moved to its current location that we see today. So another very famous hotel that's not there anymore is this 3-story Glacier Point Hotel. It was actually built in 1917, and it's not in the valley floor. It's actually 3,000 feet above the valley floor on the south rim. The little building that you see on the right here is called Mountain House, and that was actually built in 1873, so even earlier than this hotel that you're seeing here from 1917. It had 80 rooms, 180 guests. And again, it was the Glacier Point Road, the road that led to this hotel, was actually built in 1882. There's quite a few postcards of the hotel itself, but I always like interior postcards. So, and this is a great glimpse of the hotel lobby with the fireplace. The fireplace is actually 2-sided. So what you're seeing here is, it shares it with the dining room as well as with the lobby. So just kind of a unique feature of this hotel. But the real reason this hotel was built was because of the incredible views that you could have on this rim of the valley. Here you're seeing the patio with a view of Half Dome. So a great place where people would visit. A lot of people would visit for the day, so they would either hike from the bottom of the valley on the 4 Mile Trail up to the hotel, or and then they would have lunch, and then they would hike back down. So it was possible not to stay overnight and just enjoy the view of Glacier Point as you were there. So the gift shop and the cafeteria were always quite busy at this hotel. Again, incredible views here. I always like to throw this postcard in. It's out around the Glacier Point area. It's called Taft Point, but you're looking at the Yosemite Falls there in the background, and the tourists looking down into the valley floor. And since we're on the topic of postcards, there's a lot of postcards of overhanging rock, which is also at Glacier Point. And a lot of it is represented in postcards. One photographer, George Fisk, was actually one of the first that started capturing people on this overhanging rock. There's two angles, and there you can always see quite a few postcards of either people. There's one of a donkey. There's one of a car. So there's a variety of postcards reflecting this overhanging rock, but it's at Glacier Point. Another thing that Glacier Point is well known for is for the firefall. And it's also something that's been depicted in postcards, and people often fondly remember this firefall. It was actually a nightly summer event, and it was started by David Curry, who started Camp Curry in the early 1900s. And people basically, what the idea is that a huge fire was built on the top of Glacier Point, and at some point, when the fire was hot enough, and they would push the fire across the cliff, and it would give you this firefall effect, and which was what tourists really wanted to see. January 25th, 1968 was the last time that the Yosemite firefall was completed. At some point in the 60s, they decided that this probably was not a good way to have this fire in nature event, and so it started. But needless to say, there's a couple of nice postcards of it. And here, this is a great postcard. It's a chrome postcard, but it really shows that this is where the back of the postcard says, that at 9 p.m. the burning embers are put over the ledge, and so you have Half Dome in the background, and people kind of waiting around the fire before it gets pushed over the edge. So again, something, the unique thing about postcards is that, it captures things of the past, and it's accessible to everyone. So it's great. So the Glacier Point Hotel, it was a popular tourist destination, but it never really reached its success. And first, there's a variety of reasons for that. It had a very short season because it really got snowed on top of the rim. So the hotel would close during the winter. This is a great postcard of the back of the hotel. Actually, it's the front of the hotel. And obviously not accessible during the winter. So what ended up happening is the room rates were really high during the summer, and most guests only would stay one night. And a lot of people wanted really to go down to the valley floor, spend their time there. That's really where you could see a lot more things, even though the views were incredible. But the hotel struggled. This is the last image or at least the last postcard of the Glacier Point Hotel. This is the backside again. It's a chrome postcard, so it's great that it's being captured here. But on August 9th, 1969, an electrical fire burned both the hotels, both this Glacier Point Hotel and the hotel next to it, the Mountain House. It really burned it to the ground within an hour. A huge fire. And the decision was made not to rebuild this hotel on the rim. Today, there is an amphitheater there, and some of you that have gone up there can see the outline of where this Glacier Point Hotel used to be. But again, nicely captured in postcards. Another hotel that very famous in Yosemite is the Ahwahnee Hotel, and a great real photo postcard here of kind of the site of the hotel here. It was completed in 1927. It was a luxury hotel. It was an architectural masterpiece for the time. The architect was Gilbert Underwood, and it has 6 floors, including a penthouse. I do have to mention that some of these hotels that were built were where Native Americans, where tribes often would have their camps because they were, unique locations. And the Miwoks had a large camp here at where the Ahwahnee is now. In the 1880s, before the hotel was built, it was actually a large area where there was Kinneyville. There was actually a whole stable complex there before the hotel was built. Again, remembering that, to get into Yosemite, it had to be the horseback or stagecoaches. So horses and stables were an important a need for in the valley floor. But needless to say, 1927, this hotel was built there. It has unique views of Yosemite Falls, Half Dome, and Glacier Point. So its location is unique in that aspect. A couple things about this hotel. This is actually a postcard of the South Lawn. There was 3 wings to the hotel, but this is kind of the south side. And for those of you that are familiar with the Ahwahnee, you actually enter the hotel on the other side. But what's interesting to know is that 10 days before they were going to open this hotel, they decided to change the entrance it was supposed to be this side. The entrance was supposed to be from this side, but there were some problems with the ventilation, and they had to quickly decide to have the entrance on the other side. So it's kind of unique in that sense. So some of you that are familiar with the Ahwahnee Bar on this side, that's really where the entrance was supposed to be. And because of structural ventilation issues, they had to switch it to the other side. The hotel has many unique architectural features, but its dining room remain one of its main attractions. Here's a great chrome postcard of it. There's quite a few other postcards of the dining room as well, but I kind of like this one. 350 people, very large dining room, and it's supported by an even larger kitchen. Originally, the hotel was supposed to be a lot bigger than it is today. But this is 1927, and before the market was going to crash in 1928, there was already some sense of maybe this was too big of a hotel. Needless to say, they downsized the hotel, but they left the kitchen as the same size. So it has an extra large kitchen for whatever reason. But what you're seeing here, remember 1927, and you're looking at, floor to ceiling windows. Keep in mind that the glass had to be transported into the valley, one piece of glass like that. You're also seeing here some concrete pillars. Looks like wood, but it's actually concrete that's been painted to look like wood. And the wood up here, this is real wood on the ceiling, but some of these, they have some unique features that were unique, at least for the 1920s or so. Again, a beautiful setting there. There's a lot of postcards of the Great Lounge, but I kind of picked this one. It's kind of unique in that sense. So basically, it's a lounge area that's accessible to everyone. It's very large ceilings, 24-foot ceilings. Again, we're seeing floor-to-ceiling windows, some unique chandeliers as well. It has a combination of Native American art and Middle Eastern art. But at some point in 1946, they decided to paint this very unique mural, almost Art Deco, that you're seeing here above the fireplace. The Great Lounge has 2 very large fireplaces on each end. Here you're seeing 1 fireplace. But this Art Deco motif was something that they tried at the time, and it didn't last very long. It was quickly converted back to more Native American or Middle Eastern patterns. But it was captured in this great chrome postcard, so that's where I like to show it. Even though this is not a hotel, I did want to talk a little bit about, because there's a lot of winter postcards of Yosemite, is the Badger Pass Ski Lodge was actually built in 1935. And it was designed in this Park Service rustic style. So in the 30s and in the 40s, you start seeing national parks kind of starting to build their buildings in a more, so that it fits better with the environment. And this is a great example of that rustic style that you're seeing in a lot of national parks at the time. This is a 2-story log building, has a little bit of Swiss chalet style elements to it. No overnight accommodations. but it's one of the first downhill ski lodges in California. And it is within Yosemite National Park. It's on the way to Glacier Point. And it basically was used as a lounge and as a storage area. But some great postcards related to that. So Badger Pass in 19, like I said, 1935, 1930, 19, up to for about 2 decades or so, the ski resort was really used for a lot of competition. So people would come and have ski races and spectators would come. But in 1950, they realized this really was starting to have an impact on the environment. So they stopped all competitions, and the ski resort became a little bit more kind of a family ski resort to that set, more family focused. So Badger Pass is one of two existing ski areas located in a national park. The other one is in Olympic. And so another thing to keep in mind is when you look at Yosemite postcards, there are quite a few winter postcards. So there's a lot of ski postcards, there's ice skating. And the reason for that is actually in 1932, Yosemite applied to be in the Winter Olympics. They put in an application. It was denied. They did not get the venue for the 1932 Olympics. But needless to say, they were kind of building up to that, and so they really were trying to make Yosemite look like like a winter destination. So prepping up for that. So you see a lot of winter postcards of Yosemite. One more lodge that we really want to kind of talk about is the Yosemite Lodge, and here you're seeing the entrance of it in the 1920s. It actually used to be U.S. Army headquarters. It was starting in 1909. It was a site of the U.S. Army. You have to remember that the United States Army, before the National Park Service was created, it really was the Army that was helped secure and regulate the parks at that time. But this lodge was built. It was converted from the Army headquarters into a Yosemite Lodge in the 1920s. And here's a chrome postcard of what the lodge looks like today. It was, now it's all the accommodations in the park are run by a company. There's been several companies over the decades. They added the lodge. They also added prefabricated cabins to it. But needless to say, the lodge was a great because it provided winter accommodations again. So this is finally people were able to stay throughout the winter. This is the Wawona Hotel, which is opened in 1879, and it's located 4 miles from the south entrance from Yosemite. So very, very old hotel. It's still there today. It's Victorian style building, and it was started by the Washburn family. This is the main building. Buildings have been adding to the Wawona Hotel over the decades, but 1879, so a great structure that it's still there today. It's also was for those of you that are interested in Yosemite history. Galen Clark was one of the first pioneers that came into the park and really made Yosemite what it is today. And this was actually his location of his first settlement. So Galen Clark lived on this location before this hotel was built. Unique thing about this hotel is that it has a 9-hole golf course right across from the building there. It opened in 1918. It was the first regulation golf course in the Sierra Nevadas, and was the first in a national park. And there showed some fun postcards of the hotel. So there's what I've shown here is just a few postcards of some of the hotels that we've seen here. Yosemite also had very many camps, so people that weren't staying in lodges or accommodations but were able to do camping, and so there's a lot of postcards reflecting the camps as well. Other topics, like I mentioned, the valley camps. There are a lot of postcards of Camp Curry, which is another real large complex that's still there today. The High Sierra camps. So if you go up to Tuolumne Meadows, there's Glen Ellen, there's Merced Lake. High Sierra camps are being depicted in postcards. Big Trees Lodge near Wawona, also in postcards. Like I mentioned, Boysen did quite a few Native American postcards. What happened was, at some point, Native Americans were used for a part of rituals, as tourist attractions almost. So educating tourists about Native Americans, and so Native Americans started, educating people. And so there's quite a few postcards showing that. We talked about winter sports, ice skating, um, hockey, skiing, etc. More transportation, a lot of stagecoaches, a lot of trains, those type of postcards you're seeing here. And bridges and roads. So the roads that I mentioned in the beginning, there are quite a few postcards that are just reflecting the road. There's also another building called LeConte Memorial, which was actually the first location of the Sierra Club, or Sierra Club spent many years there. Other postcards of Yosemite with human features are reflected here. Any questions about the about Yosemite postcards? I have my email address here as well. And for those of you that are interested in the book, you can use Venmo. $20 include shipping, but the book is also available at many other online locations. So thank you very much.